welcome back to the Pylon Cam. It's your boy Mike with another mock draft here. This is the first mock draft I've done since free agency, so a lot has changed since the last mock draft video. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Not a whole lot is changing at the top, but I do want to say I put a lot of effort into being accurate and giving accurate analysis on the team. So if I say anything incorrectly about your team, please go ahead and correct me in the comments because I want to give the best mock draft, best content I can, and the most accurate content I can. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the mock draft. There's one trade in this mock draft. So this is the first mock draft I'm doing with trades, a trade, and it's not at pick 1. So with pick 1, we're going to go ahead and take Cam Ward here. Everything I've read is the Titans are leaning towards taking Cam Ward at the top, and I've mentioned this on Twitter, and if you don't follow me on Twitter, I highly recommend it. Please go check out my Twitter. I think Cam Ward is a much better prospect than the media is leading on. I think that if I didn't change my quarterback rankings from 2024, Cam Ward would be right behind Jaden Daniels, who I had as QB3 in that draft. I had Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, then I put Cam Ward right behind him. I think a lot goes into the narratives around this time of year, and one of the narratives that persisted all year was this is a bad quarterback class and Shedeur Sanders was QB1. I pushed back on that for months, saying Cam Ward was a better prospect than Shedeur, and I think that everybody has kind of agreed with that at this point in time. So Cam Ward, pick 1, unless the Giants or maybe even the Browns can get up to pick 1 if the Browns are okay with taking, or if they really want Cam Ward, and the Titans are okay with taking Shedeur Sanders. But at pick 2, we're going to go with Shedeur Sanders. I think Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry can't play any games with this. If they're picking this high again, they're going to be fired, and somebody else will be making this pick next year. There is a universe where they go Abdul Carter and trade back up for a Jackson Dart, who is my QB2 in this class, or a Tyler Shuck. I don't think they'll need to trade up for Tyler Shuck. I think they could take him with pick. I think they have 33 in the second round, so yeah, so we're going to go ahead and take Shedeur Sanders here at pick 2. I think he's a perfect fit for Kevin Stefanski's offense. We've seen what he was able to do with the quarterback options he's had, those pocket passers. He's been able to scheme open receivers, and, I think that with Shedeur there, that's the perfect type of quarterback for that offense. But with the Giants at pick 3, it depends on the day. I could go either way with this. I don't really know who Joe Shane is leaning. I think he views Travis Hunter as a corner who would be deployed on third down and in the red zone. But we're going to go ahead and take the best player in the draft, in my opinion, which is Abdul Carter. And then with the Patriots at pick 4, we're going to take Travis Hunter, who I think they will play as a full-time wide receiver. So this is, if you're a Patriots fan watching this, this is wide receiver 1 for you guys from now on. I think that Travis Hunter, to me, is very Garrett Wilson-esque. The way he can release, the way he's a fluid separator, pretty effortlessly does it too. I think that, he would have no problem commanding 10 to 12 targets a game. And I think the conversation around Travis Hunter is too much of what he can't do in the NFL versus what he can do. And I think he will be a very good wide receiver on day 1. So I feel really comfortable with these first 4 picks. In my opinion, the draft starts at 5 with Jacksonville on the clock here. And I've gone back and forth with this because I really like Armand Membu. And this team does need a right tackle, but they did just draft Anton Harrison 2 years ago. So I don't know if Jacksonville is totally ready to give up on him just yet. So we're not going to take Armand Membu here, and we're going to address the interior of the defensive line with Mason Graham. I think this pick will be a line player, whether that's offense or defense. There's arguments for both, but I would argue that defensive line is the bigger need in this draft, or for the Jaguars in this draft. And if you're picking this high with Mason Graham on the board, I think it's a pretty no-brainer pick. And then with the Raiders at pick 6, there are plenty of holes on this team. There's holes at corner for sure. The interior defensive line is not too great outside of Christian Wilkins, but there's not much help around him. But with who's available, I'm not sure you want to take Jahdae Barron at pick 6. I think he's definitely worth pick 6. I think he's the best corner in the draft. But I think you take a top 3 player available with Ashton Jeanty here at pick 6. I know this is a very common pick. It's becoming a more common pick. I wouldn't be shocked if the Raiders went a different direction, but I think it's going to depend on who's available. I think if Mason Graham is here, he's probably the pick over Ashton Genty because this is a very deep running back class, and picking at the top of the second round, you can take a Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson, but it just depends. With Genty, you're getting a three down player. You're getting someone who's going to be top 5 at the position at some point in his career for certain. And then you have Brock Bowers, who already is top 3, top 2 at his top 1 at the position at tight end. So outside of wide receiver, which I think Jacoby Myers is becoming a pretty underrated receiver at this point in his career, Brock Bowers, you don't have too many pass catching options, but with Geno there and a mobile quarterback, an immobile quarterback, if that's going to get not understood correctly, I think with Genty, you're adding a very valuable piece to this offense, which is going to make you competitive right away. I think Genty is an entire offense in and of itself. He's the best running back prospect to me since Saquon Barkley. I think he's a better prospect than Bijan Robinson. I think everybody wants to knock him because he played at Boise State. But I think that's kind of ridiculous if you go back, especially if you watch the Penn State game, because Genty is just one of one, in my opinion. And then with the Jets at pick 7, this is my favorite fit in the entire class with Armand Membu, because I think Armand Membu is a top 5 player in the draft. And you wouldn't have to move him to left tackle. So you keep Olu Fashanu on the left side, and then you put Membu on the right side, and you have your 2 bookend tackles for the future. With Aaron Glenn there, he knows, the impact Penei Sewell brought to Detroit. So I think Membu is the absolute best pick here. You could make the argument for Tyler Warren, but if we're talking about positional value, I would argue Armand Membu's the better player right now. And then I don't think tight end elevates this offense as much as Membu would, because he's going to make Justin Fields' life easier. He's going to make Breece Hall's life easier. He's going to add value to this offense that Tyler Warren may not, because Justin Fields is the quarterback. I'm not trying to take a shot at Justin Fields. It's just I think this will be a much more run-heavy team than a pass-heavy team with Justin Fields at quarterback. And then at pick 8, we have the Carolina Panthers. This is a predictive pick. This is a predictive mock, if I didn't say that at the top. But I've read a lot, and I don't agree with this. This is not what I would do. This is what I've been reading. This is who I think the Panthers are in on. I have read a lot. They're very attracted to Micah Williams. And again, this happens every year. This happened with Trayvon Walker back in 2022. Teams fall in love with these underproductive freak athletes. And Trayvon Walker has taken tremendous strides. And you can make the argument, if the Panthers trade for Trayvon Walker, because he is being shopped by Jacksonville, then you could go Jahdae Barron, because you have a pretty good defensive line. But I think this team needs a wide receiver 1. I don't know if there's anybody you're taking at pick 8. I don't even think I would. I think I would take some of these receivers at pick 8 over Micah Williams. But this is what I've been reading, that the Panthers are in on Micah Williams and they value him very, very highly. And then at pick 10, right? Pick 9, excuse me. We have the Saints. And with the Saints, this is an interesting spot because I've seen quarterback mocked here. I've seen tackle mocked here. I've seen edge mocked here. I've seen pretty much everything mocked here. But I want to talk about what I think would be best for the Saints if this is how the board shook out by pick 9. Excuse me. You re-signed Chase Young, who I think is pretty underrated at this point in his career. He's guaranteed 50 pressures pretty much every season since he's been in the NFL. Carl Granderson played very well on the opposite side of Chase Young last year. And he quietly had not a breakout year because he only played a handful of games, but he had a very good year in the games he did play. And then I think that with, Mike Green is in play and James Pierce Jr. should be in play. But if you're comfortable with Granderson and if you're comfortable with Chase Young, I think you look to address the interior, and this is a player I'm very high on, this is probably the highest you're going to see him mocked. But I'm going to go with interior defensive lineman because Brian Bresee has just been very underwhelming since he's been in the league. But we're going to go with Walter Nolan, who I think is the second best interior defensive lineman in this class, in a very, very good defensive lineman class. So that tells you how highly I view Walter Nolan. He comped himself to Aaron Donald. I don't know about all that, but I do think Nolan is a very, very productive player, and I do think he'll be a very productive player for the Saints if they opt to go the defensive direction. Because you can make the argument they go Jackson Dart here at pick 9, like Mel Kiper had him, and I think that that's fair game because I'm very high on Jackson Dart. But I think we're going to go address the interior here. And Saints fan, if you're against this pick, please explain why in the comments, because I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Bears at pick 10. I think the best pick for the Bears here is Ashton Genty. I actually thought about even putting Omarion Hampton here because I'm very high on Omarion Hampton as well. I think the consensus is pretty high on Omarion Hampton. I think I'm a little bit higher on him than consensus is. I would have no problem taking him here at pick 10 if I was Chicago, if they wanted to go that route. But knowing Ben Johnson is the head coach now and knowing how he understands the importance of offensive line play, after you trade for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson and you bring in Drew Dahlman from Atlanta, I don't think it stops there. I think you fix the offensive line. I think Will Campbell, in my opinion, I'm probably lower on him than consensus is. I don't think he's a very dominant player. I think there's a lot of flaws in his tape, but I do think he's a good prospect. And in my opinion, he's going to be a guard at the next level. So unless you want to go with Kelvin Banks or Josh Simmons here, I think if you take Will Campbell, you're putting him on the bench to sit behind Joe Thuney or Jonah Jackson to be a guard of the future. And I think that that's the best spot because there is a lot of parts of his game that need to be polished. And I don't think you could ever have enough offensive linemen, in my opinion. Pick 11, we have San Francisco, and I'm going to go with Jahdae Barron. I think this is my second or third favorite fit of the draft. They lost Charvarius Ward in free agency, and I think that if you're going to get the best corner in the class at pick 11, who's one of the better players in the entire class, it's one of those BPA meets positional need type marriages that teams love to see because it means you don't have to reach on anybody. But Dallas at pick 12, I think with Dallas here, I think this needs to be defense. I've seen people go receiver here. I don't know how you go receiver here with how bad the interior of this defense is, especially with Micah Parsons' future being in the air. I would bet my house he re-signs with Dallas. That's not what I'm saying, but he's not under contract beyond this year. So it's still up in the air. He's not signed, and this linebacker unit is terrible. I'm a huge Omario Overshown fan. He was one of my favorite linebackers in, I believe, 2023 when he came out. But unfortunately for him, injuries have followed him. He was injured at Texas, and he's been injured every season in the NFL. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and take Jihad Campbell here, who is the best linebacker in the class. He's an elite sideline-to-sideline speed. I think putting him in the middle of the defense, in the middle of that front seven, would be a phenomenal get for Dallas. Miami at pick 13. This is the hardest team, in my opinion, to mock for because I have seen it go so many ways. My first pick here was Malachi Starks, and that was when they had Javon Holland. Now that they don't have Javon Holland, I still don't know if it makes sense for Miami, who has to win this year, to take a safety this high when your offensive line is pretty bad and you don't know if Teron Armstead is even coming back this year. So for me, we're going to go ahead and take the best offensive lineman on the board. There's an argument, in my opinion, that he's better than Will Campbell if they're both playing guard. And we're going to take Gray Zabel here to replace Liam Eichenberg. I think this is a huge year for Tua. This is a huge year for Mike McDaniels. This is a huge year for everybody in that front office. And they have to make sure Tua is on the field. They have to make sure he's not getting a concussion and is out for an extended period of time. So for me, you take someone to play left guard right away. He has tackle flexibility. I think he'll be a guard. I think Daniel Jeremiah thinks he'll be a guard. I think a lot of people are projecting him as guard. And in a pinch, he can't play tackle. So we're going to go with Gray Zabel here to replace Liam Eichenberg at pick 13. And at pick 14, we have the Colts. And the Colts are an interesting team because this roster is really good. And I have a hard time, in my opinion, between edge and tight end. Because in my opinion, edge is unquestionably the more valuable position. Kwity Paye, you don't know what his future looks like. I don't think he's been extended yet, last time I checked. But tight end is also a need. And I think it's one of those questions where who's going to be higher on the Colts big board? Is it Mike Green? Is it James Pierce Jr.? Or is it Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland? In my opinion, Tyler Warren is the best tight end in the class. And I think that taking him at pick 14 is definitely in play. I hear the argument for edge. I actually kind of favor the argument for edge more than tight end. but we're going to go ahead and go with tight end here. Falcons at pick 15. This is an interesting pick for me because I have seen people go away from edge, and I just don't follow the logic because the defense needs work. I get it. It needs work kind of not everywhere, but you need someone opposite of I'm blanking on his name. You know the corner I'm talking about, and I'm totally blanking on his name. But you need a cornerback too, and you also need someone in the back end with Jesse Bates. But you have not had a pass rush for years, and now you don't even have Grady Jarrett in there in the middle. So this defensive line has to be addressed multiple times in this draft, if you ask me, because they didn't spend a ton of money in free agency. I know you brought in Leonard Floyd on a 1-year deal, and then you have I think Morgan Fox is now next man up behind Grady Jarrett, and he's not been good in his time playing. So for me, we're going to take the best pure pass rusher in the class, and that's James Pierce Jr., who I think is a little bit underrated of a prospect, in my opinion. I think he's kind of one of those guys where he's been so good for so long. People just put unrealistic expectations on him year in and year out, and he played better every year, but didn't meet these godlike expectations, so he's kind of falling because of that. I also hear there's some character concerns with him, but for the Falcons in a team that's looking to push for the division, you can never have enough pass rush, and I think it's definitely a position of need that needs to be addressed, and you're getting one of the best players on the board. I can make the argument for Mike Green, but I'm a big James Pierce Jr. fan as well. He's my edge 3 in the class at this moment. Next up, we have the Arizona Cardinals, and I know they brought in Dalvin Tomlinson and Josh Sweat, but I don't think that stops you from addressing the defensive line. There's the argument that if you're in love with Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron falls, I hear that. I've seen people mock wide receiver here. I get what they're saying. I don't necessarily agree with it because I think you could address it in round 2 or 3. But, people are upset with Marvin. If you're not a Cardinals fan, the perception probably is people are down on Marvin Harrison Jr. I am not one of those people. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will be just fine. His stats, his rookie year, were identical to his dad's stats, and I think he will be better. My concern isn't even with Marvin Harrison Jr., it's with Kyler Murray, but that's a discussion for another day. But anyways, you still have B.J. Ojulari, who I had high hopes for coming out of college. He's been injured a lot, and then you're hoping Darius Robinson takes a step. But we're going to go ahead and plug up the middle here with Kenneth Grant. I think Kenneth Grant's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the class. And again, these top-end interior defensive linemen are the real deal because this is a deep defensive lineman class. Yes, but also a deep interior defensive lineman class specifically. So we're going to go with Kenneth Grant to shore up that middle and play alongside Dalvin Tomlinson. I think Dalvin Tomlinson is a fantastic player, but he is getting older, and he needs help. He's going to need help in the middle. So we're going to go with Kenneth Grant. Cincinnati Bengals next up. There's no universe where this is not a defensive pick. Even if they bring back Trey Hendrickson, there's no argument that this should not be a defensive pick. I know they brought back B.J. Hill, and I know they brought back a lot of other guys. But you still, this, you need if this is a Rams-level defensive draft, the Bengals will be fighting for the Super Bowl this year, in my opinion. The Bengals are not the best team at drafting, unfortunately. So it's a tall ask. I know the Rams are one of the best teams in the NFL at drafting. But for me, taking edge 2 here and Mike Green to play alongside Trey Hendrickson or replace Trey Hendrickson potentially is the move. It has to be the move. There's really no other argument. There's no guard worth taking at this point. There's no tackle worth taking at this point. It's got to be Mike Green. Seattle, next on the clock. For me, I think Seattle has a lot of guys in their edge room. They also need a tight end, so I think Colston Loveland is in play, but I think it's a deep tight end class, and I just don't think tight end is the most valuable position in the sport of football. I think it's a very valuable position. It can be a huge impact when you have a Brock Bowers or a prime Mark Andrews or a prime Travis Kelce. I get that, but not every first-round tight end prospect is that. So for me, with Mike McDonald there, defensive head coach, I think he's going to be looking for a guy on this defensive line to to go along with Leonard Williams. I know you have Boye Mafe. I know that you brought in Tank Lawrence, but I don't think you have a guy. And Tank Lawrence, for what it's worth, did have a down year last year. I can make the argument he was done in Dallas and was ready for the season to be over after Dak got hurt. But we're going to go with Donovan Ezraku here. I think Donovan Ezraku is one of the best edges in the class. I think he's climbing up boards. He had an insane combine. Just a very, very good player here. Now, unfortunately for the Bucs, you want to address the defensive line. But the way that this draft is shaking out, there's not really a guy here that isn't a reach, in my opinion, for the defensive line. You can make the argument for Derek Harmon or Darius Alexander to go on the interior. However, I think with Will Johnson falling, who is probably going to fall pretty far because of the medicals, I think getting the second best corner in the class this late in the draft when the defensive linemen have flown off the board, I think it has to be the move for the Bucs. And I don't want to make this move. I want to address the defensive line. But if Will Johnson falls this far, I don't know how you look at him and just pass. I don't see. If you're comfortable with the medicals, and I'm banking that with this pick, the Bucs are comfortable with the medicals. I have no idea if they are, but that's my hunch. So pick 20 with the Denver Broncos. This is one of my favorite picks in the entire draft. Omarion Hampton to the Broncos. To me, Omarion Hampton is like a Nick Chubb level prospect. I think he's going to be a catalyst for an offense. I think with Sean Payton there and how he values running backs, I think that getting a player who in every other draft class pretty much would be RB, not every other, but a lot of other draft classes would be a first round talent while also being RB1. Getting him here at pick 20, that is a huge get for Sean Payton in this offense, and it's going to take a lot of stress off Bo Nix, who was their second leading rusher last year. You let Javonte Williams out the building. I get that. I was a huge Javonte Williams fan. It's unfortunate his knee got destroyed, so it just didn't work out. And then you hope Audric Estime takes a step. I wouldn't bank on it because this offense needs a running back. It needs a catalyst in the backfield, and you're getting one of the most talented players in the entire draft here at pick 20. Pick 21, we have the Steelers. This is tough because there are a lot of people who think that, like, in my opinion, Aaron Rodgers is going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. I'm just putting that out there. I think the news hasn't broke yet. If the news breaks when you're watching this, it didn't break on Sunday, March 23rd when I was recording this. But if you do get Aaron Rodgers, I don't think you look to address quarterback here. I think you look to address a position that's going to help you win now. But the tough thing with this is teams give indicators on who they're going to draft. And the Steelers are notoriously a team that if they take the prospect to dinner, that's like a mark that they are looking at them to draft them in the first round. And they did take Jalen Milroe to dinner after meeting with him. I'm not saying that this is locked in to take Jalen Milroe. Did I say Jalen Milroe? I think I did. But they took Jalen Milroe to dinner, if I wasn't clear. And that's like a mark for the Steelers that they're looking to draft someone in the first round. However, if you take Aaron Rodgers, you wait, and then you're going to have to trade up next year. I think that's just what's going to happen. And I think this team is ready to win. So I went in a different direction, and I went to address someone who can, with a defensive head coach, probably is going to be maximized with Jalen Walker, who's a hybrid player, plays on the edge and off the ball. So he plays off the tackle, hand in the dirt, and he also plays off the ball. So with Mike Tomlin, I think he'll get the most out of him. A lot of people are very high on Jalen Walker. I think if he's going to be a hybrid type player, I would probably value him a little bit lower because you're going to be asking him to do a lot, and he has a lot of polish he needs in his game. If he was going to be a full-time edge rusher, I think there's a better argument that he should go higher. I know he's linked to the Panthers all the way up at pick 8, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that. And then at pick 23, we have the Chargers. I think, and I want to say this here, pause and say this about the wide receiver class. This wide receiver class to me is very similar or reminiscent of 2022, 2023, where there's a lot of guys, but I'll say this with the 2023 class. I thought Jackson Smith and Jigba should have gone way higher than what he did. And I think I can make the same argument for Emeka Egbuka. this is the range I think receivers start coming off the board. I'm sorry, this is pick 22, not 23. And I think that they're taking their pick at the number one receiver in the class, whoever that is, Tet McMillan or, Luther Burden, Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden, whoever people have as their wide receiver one. To me, it's Matthew. If you're not including Travis Hunter, it's Matthew Golden. And the reason I'm doing this, Chargers fans, and I want to explain this, I know that corner and the entire defensive line, especially without Joey Bosa there, is a need. But when I was thinking through this pick, I could not shake the Texans game. Just watching Quentin Johnston, be targeted over and over and over again and give zero production. Literally 0 yards. I don't know how you go, especially with Justin Herbert, who's able to mask so many holes on this team. I don't know how you, and the Justin Herbert slander is a conversation for another day. It's insane. But I don't know how you go back and watch that game and don't address receiver. I understand that maybe you think you want to address it later, but with how this board is shaking out, if we're looking at the top corners who are available right now, Trey Amos is definitely in play. I think Siobhan Ravel would be in play if teams were comfortable with his medicals. Azariah Thomas. And I've seen Maxwell Harrison up there. I'm not sure I agree with that. And then if you're looking at the edge and interior players remaining, I think you can make the argument for Derek Harmon, Darius Alexander this high. I'm a huge Princely Umanmielen fan. But I think you gotta get Justin Herbert some help. And taking your pick at wide receiver 1 just seems like, you're in control of your destiny here. And then with the Packers at pick 23, I think that this is a very interesting pick because there's a lot of chatter around this team needs a wide receiver 1, and I know a lot of you are looking at the board and Tet McMillan is just sitting there. But the Packers are not a team that historically drafts receivers in the first round. They brought in Lucas Van Ness a few years ago. He's been pretty underwhelming. Jair Alexander's being shopped. And outside of Jair Alexander, this is a very bad secondary. The pass rush unit needs work too. But with the pass rushers available, Princely Umanmielen stands out to me because I just think he's very, very good. And the Packers notoriously are a team that is okay with taking players with character concerns. A lot of teams love Shamar Stewart. He's like a similar Michael Williams guy. Underproductive, but just traits are off the chart. Nick Scorton's probably in play. But I think with the top-end corner still being here, especially Trey Amos in particular, or Azariah Thomas, I'm going to go with Trey Amos because I think that Jair Alexander will not be on this team by the time the season starts. I think he could get traded on draft day. And if he's gone, then the secondary's kind of in trouble. So with the Minnesota Vikings on the clock, they have had the best free agency of any team this year. Not even close, in my opinion. The guys they brought in on both sides of the ball, just phenomenal gets, and they've really put themselves in a spot where they can take the best player in the draft, whoever they view that as. And for me, I think it's Malachi Starks if we're looking at who's available on the board. Because Malachi Starks is a top 10 talent in this class. No question about it. But he's going to fall because he plays safety. That's the issue. So I think the Vikings can go many different ways. They traded for Jordan Mason, and they still have Aaron Jones under contract. So running back could be in play, but probably not. They've done so much work on the interior defensive line. They brought in Will Fries. So I think they just take whoever's best. And you got to look at life after Harrison Smith is gone. So Malachi Starks, top player in the draft. You get him at pick 24. Insane steal. Here is where we have our trade. I'm going to have the New York Giants be trading up back into the first round. They're going to give pick 34, 69, 99, and next year's third for pick 25. I have no idea about trade comp. I get trade comp. Let me back up. I understand trade comp, and especially everybody would be knowing the Giants are coming up for a quarterback. But trade comp is so subjective year to year because you look at what the Eagles gave up for AJ Brown, and you're like, that's it. Or you look at what the Houston Texans gave DeAndre Hopkins for in a second round pick in David Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, and that's prime DeAndre Hopkins. You're looking at them sideways. So trade comp is a very fluid conversation, and I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. I know people will be upset with this pick probably, but it's just the thought. It's more of not the we're not worried about the comp. We're just doing it for the exercise because this trade can happen. It's a realistic trade. The Texans are stockpiling picks with the Laramie Tunsil trade. And at this point, if the draft falls this way, tackles are falling. So if you're picking at pick 34, you're still going to get a top-end tackle. So you traded Laramie Tunsil and then pick 25 for tons of picks. That's going to help CJ Stroud out in the future. So Giants coming back into round 1, they're going to go ahead and take my QB2 and Jackson Dart. I think Jackson Dart is the most overlooked prospect. And if you follow me on Twitter, I have been talking about Jackson Dart for a long time. And I just think that doing this for 4 years now, I don't understand. And I guess it's people, but people did this to Bo Nix. It was the same argument for Bo Nix. And I got killed for having Jackson Dart in the first round in my first mock draft. And now he's in the first round, and Mel Kiper has him all the way up at pick 9. So if he survives pick 9 and some other teams who I think could potentially be in play, I think he'll fall a little bit. And I think that he's going to go, my theory is he'll go in the Jordan Love range. I think Jordan Love went pick 24. I think he has everything that everybody looks for every year. And he is following in the same footsteps Bo Nix did. Bo Nix was a second-round guy, top-end second-round guy. And then he crushed the Senior Bowl. Jackson Dart crushed the Senior Bowl. Bo Nix crushed the Combine. Jackson Dart crushed the Combine. Bo Nix crushed the whiteboard talks. Jackson Dart, by all accounts, has crushed whiteboard talks. And people wanted to argue Bo Nix was a system quarterback at Oregon. Same arguments being made for Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. He's a system quarterback, but I don't see that. He had no run game in Ole Miss with Quinshon Judkins being gone. He was the second leading rusher at Ole Miss. He was like top 3 in all of college football in passing yards. He did most of his damage without Trey Harris, who I'm very high on. And I think that with Jackson Dart, I don't know what I'm missing. Like, to be honest, I think I would have him pretty high in my quarterback rankings last year as well. I think that he would probably be right behind, like, neck and neck with J.J. McCarthy, in my opinion. I think J.J. McCarthy is a fine player. I think Jackson Dart has more upside than J.J. McCarthy, personally. And he's super young. I think he's only, like, barely 21. So, super young kid. 4 years, 5-star recruit, went to USC, transferred to Ole Miss, and has been balling out every year. I don't know what I'm missing. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize like they don't know what they're missing either. So with all of that being said, Los Angeles Rams here at pick 26. I think Luther Burden to the Rams is one of my favorite fits in the entire draft because he would replace everything Cooper Kupp did. But you brought in Devontae Adams. So I think you probably feel comfortable at wide receiver 2 across Puka Nacua. And I don't think Devontae Adams is washed at all. Anybody who says that just didn't watch any of him play last year or just is looking at numbers from fantasy. He's obviously not prime Devontae Adams anymore, but he's definitely not washed. He's going to be very productive. He'll get you 1,000 yards with Matt Stafford, no doubt in my mind. But I like Luther Burden a lot. But since they have Devontae Adams, we're going to go in a different direction, and we're going to go corner here. And I'm going to go ahead and take Ezra Thomas. I think Ezra Thomas, one of the most underrated corners in the draft. Same with Siobhan Ravel, but I understand why Siobhan Ravel is falling because he's coming off an ACL tear. But Ezra Thomas was lights out this year, and I think he's a very, very, very talented player. Baltimore Ravens here, pick 27. This is a tough pick, in my opinion, because I understand that you allowed 31st most passing yards in the NFL per game. But with the corners available, anything is a reach, in my opinion. And I don't think secondary was the issue. I actually think it was a year without Mike McDonald, and you don't have a guy in that edge room. You have a bunch of guys. You don't have a guy. And I don't think Kyle Van Noy, Adisa Isaac, or Travius Robinson stopped you from adding to that. David Ajabo, unfortunately, someone I was very high on before he tore his Achilles at the Combine, has been pretty bad. And I think Adafe Owe has been fine, but you don't have a guy. And I think the best edge rusher, or one of the most overlooked edge rushers in the draft right now, is Princely Umanmielen, who we're going to take here at pick 27. I'm kind of creeping him higher and higher into the first round. I've had him go to Detroit. I think both mock drafts I've done this year that were recorded, not the ones I've been putting out on Twitter. But I think Princely Umanmielen is one of the most productive edge rushers in the entire class. He's falling because of character concerns. But again, the Ravens are not a team that have shied away from character concern players. A lot of teams do. The Detroit Lions, I think, are one of those teams where they don't want players who are going to affect their culture. But some teams, like the Steelers come to mind, have such a good culture that they can get these guys to buy in. And I think the Ravens are the same thing. And I think Princely Umanmielen might come in and be your most productive edge rusher in year one. Not because the other guys are bad, but there's not a guy there. And I think Princely Umanmielen has the potential to be that guy. I also would, someone can make the argument for Shamar Stewart. I think the pass rush win rate percentage is a big red flag. Princely Umanmielen has one of the highest pass rush win rate percentages in the entire draft. And I know you want to get depth at corner because there are only 3 corners on this roster. And it's how much do you trust Jalen Armour-Davis to take a step? Because outside of Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey, and Jalen Armour-Davis, there's not a corner on this draft or on this team. But again, who are you taking here with how this board is shaken out? Unless you trust Siobhan Ravel's medicals, which I think would be a fantastic pick. Do you trust Benjamin Morrison's medicals, which would be a pretty good pick? I don't think Maxwell Hairston, I know he had a really, really good combine. I don't know if he comes in and is just a lights out corner. I could see him struggling a little bit. So I went with Princely Umanmielen because I think he might be one of the best players on the board. And I don't think receiver is a huge need because Rashad Bateman had a very good year last year. You obviously have Zay Flowers, who is a good player. You also have Isaiah Likely, who could be next man up or overtake Mark Andrews this year. And then you still have Mark Andrews, who, despite how he started the year, finished the year very well. So I don't think receiver is in play here, even though there are some very talented receivers on the board. You could be looking at me saying, Mike, Tet McMillan's still on the board. These guys are still on the board, and I don't think that they are. It's not last year's class where every receiver's a hit. It's just not. It's very reminiscent of 2023, where I think a lot of the receivers that are going to do a lot of damage come off in day 2. It's where Jaden Reed came off, Rashee Rice comes to mind, et cetera, et cetera. So, Detroit Lions, pick 28. This was a pretty tough pick for me because I almost talked myself into Tet McMillan because he would add an element to this offense that isn't there. You're trying to have that with Tim Patrick, who you just extended, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But here's my issue with that is, as a Giants fan, I know what it's like to be banking on players to come back from injury and be the same. And I understand what it's like trying to bank on players to break out. And I think it's just failed so many times that maybe for other teams it's different. But I would want to insulate this defensive line. God forbid Aiden Hutchinson is not the same, which I'm not hoping, I'm not predicting. I just am putting it on the table because it's a realistic scenario. So for me, there are no really high octane edge rushers available on the board here, in my opinion. But I know that a team is going to take a gamble on Shamar Stewart, and I honestly think he'll probably end up going higher than I think because the NFL values these players differently, and they put a lot of stock into traits. And what's his name? Shamar Stewart is a freak of nature. I have concerns because of the pass rush win rate percentage. The productiveness is just not there. But these kids they are kids. They're not finished products. Well, they're young men, but they're not finished products. And a team is going to say, I can get more out of him, which probably is true given with how unproductive he was. But I could see the Lions falling in love with this kid and putting him out on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. Washington Commanders here. This is a tough pick for me because secondary is such a huge need. And again, are you comfortable with Benjamin Morrison's medicals? Are you comfortable with Siobhan Ravel's medicals? Do you fall in love with Maxwell Harrison because of the combine performance? The D-line got addressed last year for sure. They put a lot of stock in it early in the draft, specifically with Johnny Newton. They brought in some guys. My concern, though, is it a reach? And do you've already invested premium capital into it. So you kind of want to let those kids develop a little bit before you bring in some more competition at the same position. Where I came to is, all right, our most valuable player is Jaden Daniels. No question about it. Our right tackle was a third-round pick from last year. So it's not a ton of premium capital invested. It's still a top 100 pick. But do we want to put our franchise behind someone we're banking on getting better when they might not? I think that, what's his name? Brandon Coleman probably gets better. I mean, he is a rookie, and he didn't have a horrible rookie season. But I think if you got Kelvin Banks staring you in the face all the way down here at pick 29, I think you take a stab at it. Because, again, you got to protect Jaden Daniels, who, by all measures, can be a pocket passer. Like, it's not like he'll just run away from people and make magic happen. No, like Jaden Daniels is very efficient from the pocket. So I don't think that you want to force this pick somewhere it doesn't need to be forced. I think Derek Harmon's in play. I think a lot of the D linemen are in play. Don't get me wrong. Derek Harmon, Darius Alexander, TJ Sanders potentially. I'm a big fan of Omar Norman Lott. I don't think he goes this high. But I think you got to protect Jaden Daniels at all costs. Buffalo Bills corner. This team is so interesting because the more you look at the roster, specifically on offense, it's really impressive what Josh Allen is doing. Because they couldn't even get Amari Cooper to come back, who I don't think is washed by any means. He just really wasn't featured in that offense. He was a midseason trade. But you need, like, receiver is a huge need, and I would take Ted McMillan here. But I also know that Josh Allen is superhuman. And this defensive line under Sean McDermott still needs work. I know you brought in Joey Bosa, but corner is also a huge need. But I think with Derek Harmon here, I don't know. I want to go Derek Harmon really bad, but I don't know how you pass on Ted McMillan if he's here. I don't think people are expecting him to be here, but I think he's going to fall. I think a lot of these receivers are going to fall. I like Emeka Egbuka a lot. He's very Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jackson Smith, and Jigba come to mind type player. Luther Burden reminds me a ton of prime Cooper Kupp. But I think Ted McMillan can be everything you thought Keon Coleman was going to be. I don't think Keon Coleman is that good, personally. I think he's a worse version of Ted McMillan. And I think Ted McMillan can run better routes. He's a better separator. He's better yards after catch guy. And I'm not trying to dump on every fan base gets mad when you criticize a player, but not every player is a stud. It's just, it is what it is. But you used pretty much your first round pick on Keon Coleman last year. This is why I'm torn. I think we're going to stick with Derek Harmon. I also thought about Colston Loveland because Dalton Kincaid has not lived up to the hype at all, in my opinion. And I think Colston Loveland's probably as good or a better prospect. But we're going to go with Derek Harmon. Bills fans, if you think this should be a receiver, I want to hear why. I also agree because I think that you got to get Josh Allen a guy. That's not Khalil Shakir. Not that Khalil Shakir's bad. I actually think Khalil Shakir is a very good player. He's second in the NFL in yards after catch last year. So I don't see anything wrong with him. I'm just saying you need someone to help him. But pick 31, you pretty much could pencil in any tackle you want here. I'm going to go with Josh Simmons because Josh Simmons has potential to be the best tackle in the class. It's just, do you trust him coming off the ACL tear? That's my whole hiccup. And then the Eagles are a very tough team to mock for because there's so much depth on this roster. They have so much depth at pretty much every position. The positions I thought of replacing were Jahan Dotson as wide receiver 3 with Ted McMillan, which adds a huge element to this offense, but do you need him? No, because you have Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, and Smitty. Do you want to go edge to put someone with Nolan Smith? I think so, because you're shopping Bryce Huff. Do you bring in competition for Jordan Davis, who hasn't really proven much outside of being a great run defender? But what I think is a realistic scenario is Dallas Goedert gets traded potentially to the Patriots because they still need a weapon, and I know they have Hunter Henry, but I think Dallas Goedert could also get traded to LA, potentially, the Chargers, or the Rams, but I think they would probably want to ship him out of conference. So I thought about Colston Loveland here, and I know Eagles fans, let me know what you think about this pick, because you're not an easy team to mock for, and I'm pretty spot on with the Eagles, but I'm over the years, but this is a tough one this year, because the roster is just it's just nuts. It's out of this world, which is very upsetting as a Giants fan, but it is what it is. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this video. That's going to do it for this mock draft. Let me know your thoughts, comments, and opinions in the comment section, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.